Please come with me. My twins need a mother." The single father told the bride at the church door, his voice breaking through the howling blizzard wind. "Before we begin, we'd love for you to watch the story closely, and by the end, rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us understand the kind of stories you enjoy, and it guides us in creating even better content for you." Abigail Hammond stood frozen in her wedding dress, veil whipping in the fierce winter storm. The stranger before her was covered in snow, ice clinging to his beard and eyebrows, his desperate eyes pleading with her through the white chaos. Behind her, inside the warm church, her groom waited at the altar, probably wondering what was taking so long. "Sir, I don't understand," Abigail stammered, clutching her bouquet of winter roses tighter against her chest. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "Jacob Warren, ma'am. My wife. She passed 3 days ago bringing our twins into this world. The babies need milk, need warmth, need a woman's care. The midwife said find a woman who just had a child or—" His voice cracked, and he had to pause to gather himself. "Or find someone with a kind heart who might help save them. I've been to every house in Cedar Falls, knocked on every door. Nobody can help. Some tried, but their own babies need them. Then I saw this church all lit up, saw a wedding happening, and I thought maybe God sent me here for a reason." Abigail's hand went to her throat. Through the open church door, she could hear the organ playing softly, could see guests turning in their pews to look at the delay. She could see her groom's mother, Mrs. Sterling, frowning with impatience. "You're asking me to leave my own wedding? On my wedding day?" Jacob's weathered face crumpled with desperation and shame. "I know how it sounds, ma'am. I know I got no right to ask this of you, but I'm asking you to save my children's lives. They're dying right now, this very minute. Won't last till morning without proper help. I got nobody else to turn to. Every door I knocked on turned me away. You're my last hope." Inside the church, Abigail's groom, Richard Sterling, appeared at the doorway. He was dressed in his finest black suit, imported from back east, his hair perfectly combed, his face red with impatience and growing anger. "Abigail, what's the meaning of this delay? Who is this vagrant, and why are you speaking with him? People are waiting. My parents are waiting. This is highly inappropriate." "Richard, this man says his newborn twins are dying right now. His wife just passed away 3 days ago in childbirth, and that's certainly tragic," Richard interrupted coldly, brushing imaginary dust from his expensive sleeve. "But it's not our concern. We have our own lives to attend to. Come inside now. People are getting restless, and my mother is quite upset about this disruption." Abigail looked between the two men standing before her. Richard, whom she'd known for 6 months, the banker's son who had courted her properly, who promised her security, a fine house in town, respectability, and a comfortable life. And Jacob Warren, a complete stranger covered in snow and desperation, begging for mercy for his dying babies, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "How far is your home, Mr. Warren?" she asked quietly, something stirring in her heart. 2 miles north of town, ma'am. Small cabin just past the Miller farm, near the old oak grove. My wife's buried there now, under that big oak tree she loved so much." Richard grabbed Abigail's arm, his fingers digging in harder than necessary. "You can't be seriously considering this absolute madness. We have a wedding to complete, a reception planned with 200 guests. My family has spent a fortune on this day. The food is prepared, the musicians are hired. People have traveled from 3 towns over." Abigail pulled her arm free, feeling something shift and crack open in her heart, like ice breaking in spring thaw. She had been raised by her grandmother after her own mother died bringing her into this world. Her father had never recovered from the loss, drinking himself to death before Abigail turned 5. She knew intimately what it meant to grow up without a mother's love, to feel that absence every single day of your life. Those babies need help right now, this very moment, Richard. They're dying. Then let him find a wet nurse, a neighbor woman, a relative, anyone but my bride. Richard's voice rose, echoing across the churchyard. "Abigail, if you walk away from this church, don't expect to come back. I won't be made a fool of in front of my family and the entire town. Do you understand me? If you walk out that door with this stranger, We are finished. Completely finished. The organ music had stopped now. Guests were crowding the doorway, whispering and pointing, craning their necks to see what drama was unfolding. Mrs. Sterling pushed her way to the front, her face pinched with disapproval. Abigail Hammond, what is the meaning of this spectacle? Get inside this church immediately and marry my son as you promised. Abigail's Aunt Margaret, the woman who had helped raise her after her grandmother died, pushed through the crowd with more gentleness. She was a small woman with kind eyes and work-worn hands, dressed in her Sunday best for her niece's wedding. Child, what's happening here? Who is this man? Abigail turned to her aunt, the one person who had always understood her heart. Aunt Margaret, this man is Jacob Warren. He has newborn twins dying at home. His wife just died bringing them into the world. The babies need help tonight, or they won't see morning. He's been to every house in town, and nobody can help him. Margaret looked at Jacob's desperate face, saw the grief and fear etched into every line, then turned to look at Richard's angry, entitled expression. She had lived through hardship in her own life, had buried 2 of her own children to fever, had known hunger and loss and heartbreak. She placed a weathered hand on Abigail's shoulder. You do what your heart tells you, girl. Don't let nobody make that choice for you. You got to live with your decisions for the rest of your life, so make sure they're your own decisions. Abigail looked down at her white wedding dress, at the delicate lace that had taken 3 seamstresses 2 months to complete, at the bouquet of winter roses that had cost Richard's family what a working man might earn in a month. She thought about the life she was about to enter, comfortable, predictable, safe, respectable. A fine house in town, servants to do the hard work, social gatherings with other wealthy families, children raised by nursemaids while she attended ladies' teas. Then she thought about 2 motherless babies fighting for life in a cold cabin somewhere beyond town in this terrible blizzard. She thought about her own mother, who had died giving her life. She thought about growing up always feeling that absence, that hole in her heart where a mother's love should have been. Take me to them, she said to Jacob, her voice steady and clear. Richard's face turned from red to purple. Abigail Hammond, if you walk away from me now, we're finished. Do you hear me? Finished. You'll be a laughingstock, a woman who abandoned her own wedding. No decent man will ever want you. You'll end up alone, forgotten, a cautionary tale mothers tell their daughters. Abigail reached up and carefully removed her veil, the delicate fabric that had belonged to Richard's grandmother. She handed it to Aunt Margaret, along with her bouquet. I understand perfectly, Richard. You're the kind of man who can stand in a warm church in his expensive suit while babies die in the cold, because helping them would be inconvenient and embarrassing. I can't marry someone like that. I won't marry someone like that. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Mrs. Sterling actually swooned, caught by her husband. Richard sputtered in rage and humiliation, his face now an alarming shade of red. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, and I won't be there. But Abigail was already moving. She gathered up her heavy skirts and followed Jacob through the snow to his wagon. It was a simple farm wagon, not fancy, but sturdy and practical. Aunt Margaret grabbed blankets from the church supplies, wrapping them around herself. I'm coming too, Margaret announced firmly. You'll need experienced hands with twins, and I've brought more babies into this world than I can count. Jacob helped both women into the wagon, his hands shaking with relief and residual fear. As they pulled away from the church, Abigail looked back once to see Richard standing in the doorway, surrounded by confused and gossiping guests. She felt no regret, no doubt, only a strange sense of rightness settling over her like one of Aunt Margaret's warm quilts. The blizzard raged with renewed fury as Jacob drove the wagon north through increasingly deep snow. He had to shout over the howling wind to be heard, and even then the women had to lean close to catch his words. My wife's name was Sarah McKinney before she married me. We've been married 4 years come spring. Met her at a church social when I first come west. She was the prettiest thing I ever seen, and the kindest too. Her family had a farm south of here, but they all got the fever 6 years back. She was the only one who survived. We both knew what it was to be alone in the world. Abigail pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her wedding dress already soaked from the snow. Tell me more about her. She loved flowers, spent every spring planting whatever she could get to grow in this hard soil. She could make the saddest person smile just by talking to them. She volunteered at the church, helped new families settling in the territory, taught children their letters. When she knew the babies were coming, she was so happy, so excited. She made little clothes with her own hands, knitted blankets, prepared everything. She made me promise. His voice broke. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure they survived. She said our love would live on in them, that they were the best parts of both of us. Abigail's heart ached for this man and his devastating loss. When did things go wrong? Birth started normal enough. Sarah was brave through all of it. Old Mrs. Henderson, the midwife, said everything was progressing fine. But then the second baby came, and there was too much bleeding. Mrs. Henderson tried everything she knew, but couldn't stop it. Sarah held on for near a whole day after, got to hold both babies, got to name them and tell them she loved them. Then she just slipped away, peaceful-like in her sleep. What are their names? Aunt Margaret asked gently. Boy and girl. Called the boy Thomas after Sarah's father, who died in the fever. The girl she named Rose after my mother back east, who I haven't seen in 10 years since I come west. Sarah thought maybe if we gave them strong family names, they'd have the strength to survive. The cabin appeared through the swirling snow like a vision from a dream. It was small but well built, with sturdy log walls and a stone chimney. Smoke still rose from that chimney, meaning Jacob had left the fire burning when he went desperately searching for help. There was a small barn nearby and a chicken coop, signs of a modest but hard-working life. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean and well organized. You could see a woman's touch everywhere. Curtains on the windows, dried flowers hanging from the rafters, a braided rug on the floor. On the bed, covered with a beautiful quilt, lay 2 tiny bundles wrapped in blankets. Abigail's heart seized at how still they were. She rushed over, Aunt Margaret right behind her, their wet skirts dragging on the clean floor. The babies were alive but barely responsive. Their little faces were pale, almost translucent, their lips taking on a bluish tinge. Their cries were weak and pitiful, barely more than whimpers. Abigail had helped her aunt birth and care for children before, had assisted with difficult deliveries in their community. She knew these babies didn't have much time left. We need goat's milk if you have it, Margaret said immediately, already removing her shawl and rolling up her sleeves. And warm water, clean cloths, more blankets. Show me what you've got. I got a goat in the barn, Jacob said, already moving toward the door. Good milker, but I haven't been able to milk her proper while trying to care for Sarah and then trying to keep the babies alive. She's probably uncomfortable and full. Go milk that goat right now, and bring us all the milk she'll give, Margaret ordered in the firm voice that had guided many a crisis. We'll start warming these babies up and clearing their airways. While Jacob ran to the barn, fighting through the snow, Abigail and Margaret worked with the practiced efficiency of women who knew what needed doing. They warmed water over the fire, tested its temperature carefully, then used it to gently clean the babies. Both infants were shockingly tiny, fragile as bird bones, their skin papery and delicate. Little Rose opened her eyes briefly, and Abigail felt something crack open wide in her chest. Those eyes were dark and searching, instinctively looking for a mother who would never come, seeking comfort and love and safety in a world that had already taken so much from her. It's all right, little one, Abigail whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm here now. I'm right here, and I won't leave you. Aunt Margaret worked on Thomas, who was even weaker than his sister. This boy's in bad shape, she said quietly. Don't know if we got to him in time. We did, Abigail said fiercely. We got here, and that means there's still hope. We're not giving up on either of them. Jacob returned with fresh goat's milk, still warm from the animal. Margaret immediately showed Abigail the technique she'd used for years with babies who couldn't nurse properly. They dipped clean cloths into the slightly cooled milk, let the baby suckle on the cloth, getting small amounts of nourishment into their desperate little bodies. It was slow, delicate, Heartbreaking work. For every few drops the babies managed to swallow, they'd lose strength and stop trying. But Abigail and Margaret were patient and persistent, coaxing, encouraging, never giving up. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. They took turns feeding the babies, keeping them warm near the fire, but not too close, monitoring their breathing, checking the color returning to their skin or draining away. Jacob paced like a caged animal, unable to sit still, occasionally touching his children's tiny hands with one finger, as if afraid they'd disappear if he looked away. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault on the small cabin. Inside, 3 people fought death with nothing more than warm milk, clean cloths, determination, and love. Somewhere around midnight, Thomas suddenly let out a real cry. Not a whimper, but an actual angry, demanding cry of a hungry baby. All 3 adults froze, hardly daring to believe it. "That's it," Margaret said, her face breaking into a tired smile. "That's the sound we needed to hear. He's fighting now." Rose followed her brother's example an hour later, crying with surprising strength for such a tiny thing. Color was returning to both babies' faces, their lips losing that frightening blue tinge, their skin warming under careful hands. By the time dawn broke and the blizzard finally exhausted itself, both Thomas and Rose were nursing properly from milk-soaked cloths, their cries strong and demanding, their little fists waving with new energy. Jacob sat in the corner chair, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with relief and grief all tangled together. The babies would live, but Sarah would never know it. She'd never see them grow, never hear them laugh, never watch them take their first steps. Abigail approached him carefully, still wearing her ruined wedding dress, now stained with milk and baby mess and snow. She knelt beside his chair. "They're going to be all right now, Mr. Warren. Your wife's babies are going to live." Jacob looked up, tears streaming down his weathered, unshaven face. "You saved them. You walked away from your own wedding, gave up everything, to save my children's lives. I don't even know how to begin thanking you. I can't ever repay what you've done." "You don't need to repay it," Abigail said gently. "But you do need help going forward. 2 newborns are too much for one person to handle alone, especially while you're grieving and trying to keep a farm running." Aunt Margaret came over, wiping her hands on her apron, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Girl's right. These babies need constant care for the next few weeks at minimum. They're still weak, still vulnerable. Can't leave them alone for even a few hours." Jacob nodded slowly, trying to think through his grief and exhaustion. "I got a little money saved up. Not much, but some. Could pay you both to stay here. Help me figure out how to manage all this. I know it ain't proper, you being here unmarried, but I could ask Mrs. Henderson or another church lady to come stay too. Keep things respectable." Abigail looked at the 2 sleeping babies, now peaceful and warm, then at the raw grief etched into every line of Jacob's face. She thought about the church she'd left behind, the groom who'd given her an ultimatum instead of understanding, the life of comfortable emptiness she'd walked away from. She thought about her own mother, who she'd never known, who died giving her life. She thought about her father, who'd loved her mother so much he couldn't survive losing her. She thought about all the motherless children in the world, growing up with that hole in their hearts. "I'll stay," she said firmly. "Not for money, though if you want to pay me, I won't refuse since I'll need to eat. But someone needs to help these babies thrive, to give them the mother's love they lost. I know something about growing up without a mother. These babies deserve better than that if we can give it to them." The next days and weeks passed in a blur of exhausting but deeply rewarding work. Abigail essentially moved into the cabin, sleeping in Sarah's old rocking chair near the baby's cradle, catching moments of rest whenever both twins were sleeping at the same time, which wasn't often. Aunt Margaret came by daily to help, check on the baby's progress, and bring supplies from town. The town itself was buzzing with gossip about the runaway bride. Some people called Abigail foolish and impulsive. Others called her a saint and an angel of mercy. The scandal grew when Richard Sterling, humiliated beyond bearing, announced he was leaving Cedar Falls to take a banking position in a larger town back east. His family left with him, their heads high but their pride in tatters. Abigail didn't care what people said. She was too busy learning the distinct personalities of Thomas and Rose, too occupied with the constant demands of infant care, too focused on helping Jacob begin to heal from his devastating loss. And slowly, she learned Jacob's full story. He'd come west 7 years ago from Pennsylvania, the youngest of 5 brothers, seeking land and opportunity that didn't exist back home. He'd worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, and finally bought this small piece of land. Met Sarah at a church social, just when he was starting to feel the loneliness of frontier life, too keenly to bear. She was serving punch, Jacob told Abigail one evening as they cleaned up after feeding the twins. Had this smile that just lit up the whole room. I was so nervous talking to her, kept dropping things, saying stupid things. But she laughed at my jokes anyway, bad as they were. Asked if she could see me again. What attracted you to her? Besides being pretty? Jacob smiled slightly, the first real smile Abigail had seen from him. She was genuine, real, didn't put on airs or pretend to be something she wasn't. And she was kind to everyone. Didn't matter if you were the richest man in town or the poorest. She treated everyone the same, with respect and warmth. She sounds wonderful. She was. We married 6 months after we met. Her family gave us their blessing before the fever took them. We built this cabin together, her and me, every log and nail. Survived 3 hard winters, 2 failed crops, a fire that took the first barn. We were just starting to really build something, just starting to think about having children, when... He couldn't finish. Abigail touched his hand briefly. She lives on in Thomas and Rose. They have her eyes, I think. They do. And her stubborn chin. Jacob actually chuckled. Rose especially. That girl's going to be a handful when she gets older, mark my words. As the weeks turned into months, the babies grew stronger and more alert. Thomas revealed himself to be a serious, thoughtful baby who studied everything with intense concentration. Rose was all energy and determination from the start, fighting harder than her brother for every feeding, every milestone, hitting them all just a bit earlier than expected. Abigail fell completely in love with both children. She loved the weight of them in her arms, the sweet baby smell of their heads, the way they'd search for her face when they heard her voice. She loved their first real smiles, their grasping fingers, their tiny feet. She loved even the difficult parts, the midnight feedings, the crying jags, the worry when one seemed slightly warm or slightly off. Jacob watched his daughter bond with his children and felt something shifting in his grieving heart. Abigail had given up everything to save Thomas and Rose. She'd sacrificed her wedding, her comfortable future, her reputation, and asked nothing in return. She worked from dawn to well past dark, caring for his children with patience and love, never complaining, never acting like it was a burden. And she kept Sarah's memory alive. She'd ask Jacob to tell stories about Sarah, would listen with genuine interest, would repeat those stories to the babies, even though they were too young to understand. She'd saved Sarah's clothes, her personal things, promising to give them to Rose when she was old enough to treasure them. One evening, when the twins were nearly 2 months old and strong enough that the constant fear had finally eased, Jacob worked up the courage to say what had been on his mind. Abigail, I need to talk to you about something important. Abigail looked up from mending one of Jacob's shirts, something she'd started doing without being asked. Of course. Is everything all right? Everything's better than all right, thanks to you. The babies are thriving. The cabin's never been cleaner, and He struggled for words. I'm starting to heal. That's because of you. I'm glad I could help. That's what I need to talk about. The helping. You've been here 2 months now, giving everything you got to my children. I know you probably want to get back to your own life eventually. Maybe find another man to marry. Start your own family. And I'd understand that. But, he took a deep breath. But I need you to know that if you wanted to stay, if you wanted to be part of this family permanently, I would be more than grateful. I'd be honored. Abigail's heart began to race. Jacob, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying you belong here. The babies need you. I need you. Not just for help with work, but... He struggled with expressing feelings he barely understood himself. But I look forward to you being here when I wake up. I like talking to you in the evenings. I like how you laugh at my bad jokes and don't get upset when I track mud inside. I like who I am when you're around. Are you asking me to stay as, what, a hired woman? No. Well, yes, if that's what you want. But I'm hoping you might consider staying as family, my partner in raising these children. And maybe, eventually, if you could ever feel that way, as my wife. Abigail set down her mending with shaking hands. Jacob, you loved Sarah. I can see it in everything you do, everything you say. I would never want to replace her or make you feel like you're betraying her memory. You wouldn't be replacing her, Jacob said earnestly. Sarah will always be my first love, the mother of my children. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and so are Thomas and Rose. Sarah would want her babies to have a mother's love. She'd want me to find happiness again if I could. And you? He looked at her with surprising intensity. You make me think I might be able to be happy again someday. I need time to think about this, Abigail said, though her heart already knew the answer. Take all the time you need. No pressure. Just know the offer's there. But Abigail had already known her answer before Jacob finished speaking. She'd known it from the moment she first held these babies and felt her heart expand to hold them. She'd known it watching Jacob grieve his wife while still showing up every day for his children. She'd known it in every midnight feeding, every shared meal, every small victory as the twins grew stronger and more alive. She'd known it because this small cabin felt more like home than any fine house in town ever could. This simple farmer, with his rough hands and gentle heart, was more of a man than Richard Sterling with all his money and social standing would ever be. 3 days later, she gave Jacob her answer. They were sitting on the porch watching a spring sunset, the twins sleeping peacefully inside after their evening feeding. The winter that had nearly killed them was finally losing its grip on the land. I'll stay, Abigail said. Not as hired help. As family. As a mother to Thomas and Rose. And yes, eventually, as your wife if that's truly what you want. Jacob turned to look at her, hope and disbelief warring on his face. You mean it? You'd really stay? I walked away from one wedding because the groom didn't have the heart I needed him to have. I won't walk away from you because you have the best heart I've ever known. You loved your wife enough to honor her memory while still living your life. You love your children enough to accept help from a stranger. That's the kind of man worth staying for. I don't want to rush you into anything, Jacob said carefully. We can wait as long as you need. Years, if necessary. I don't need years. I need time for the twins to be stable, for you to finish grieving properly, for the town gossip to die down a bit. But I don't need years. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside, Rose started to fuss, and both adults smiled at the familiar sound. That's my cue, Abigail said, standing up. Your daughter has opinions about when she should be fed. Our daughter, Jacob corrected gently. If you're staying, if you're becoming family, then she's our daughter. Both of them are. Abigail felt tears spring to her eyes. Our daughter. I like the sound of that. Spring turned to summer, and the small farm came alive with new growth. Jacob worked the fields while Abigail managed the cabin and babies. They developed an easy rhythm, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and growing affection. The town eventually accepted that Abigail wasn't leaving, that she'd chosen the Warren family over her chance at an easier life. Some people still gossiped, but most came to respect her choice. Several women even sought her out, asking advice about their own children, drawn to her obvious skill and patience. In late summer, when the twins were 6 months old and thriving, Jacob asked Abigail if she'd consider making their arrangement official. She agreed, and they were married quietly in the same church where she'd walked away from Richard Sterling. This time, there was no elaborate dress or expensive flowers. Abigail wore a simple blue dress she'd sewn herself. Jacob wore his Sunday best, freshly cleaned and mended. Aunt Margaret stood as witness, holding both twins during the ceremony, tears of joy streaming down her weathered face. The preacher, Reverend Thomas, smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife. I've been doing weddings for 30 years, he said, and I can honestly say I've never seen two people more suited to each other or more deserving of happiness. May God bless this union and this family." The small gathering of friends and well-wishers applauded. Even Mrs. Henderson, the midwife who delivered Thomas and Rose and been unable to save Sarah, was there, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When the ceremony ended and people filed out, Abigail approached Mrs. Henderson. "Thank you for coming. I know this might be difficult for you." The old midwife shook her head. "Child, I've been praying for this family ever since that terrible night. Praying Jacob would find help, that the babies would survive, that somehow good would come from all that tragedy. You're the answer to those prayers. Sarah would be grateful, I'm sure of it." The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Farming life was hard, money was often tight, and raising twins took every ounce of energy and patience they possessed. But the little family thrived on love, hard work, and determination. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, gentle boy who loved animals and spent hours helping his father in the barn and fields. He had a special touch with the livestock, able to calm even the most skittish horse or anxious cow. Rose was fierce and independent from the start, the first to climb trees, explore beyond the farm boundaries, and ask the endless questions that drove her parents to distraction and delight. Jacob and Abigail had 3 more children together, 2 girls named Hannah and Emma, and another boy they named Samuel. The cabin was expanded room by room as the family grew, Jacob and his neighbors working together to add space for the growing brood. But Thomas and Rose always held a special place in everyone's heart. They were the children who had nearly died, who'd been saved by a stranger's sacrifice, who'd brought their parents together through tragedy and compassion. On the twins' 10th birthday, Abigail knew it was time for a conversation she'd been preparing for. She sat them both down in the parlor while their younger siblings played outside. "I want to tell you about your mother," she began. "Your first mother, Sarah Warren." Both children sat quietly. They'd always known, and that way children understand things without needing to be told explicitly, that Abigail wasn't their birth mother. Jacob had never hidden Sarah's existence, had kept her photograph on the mantel, had told stories about her. "We know about Mama Sarah," Rose said softly. "Papa told us she died when we were born. He told us she loved us very much," Thomas added, "that she held us and named us before she went to heaven." Abigail took a deep breath and told them the whole story. The blizzard, the desperate father bursting into a church during a wedding, the choice she'd made at that doorway, the long night fighting to save 2 tiny lives, the weeks and months that followed. "So you were supposed to marry someone else?" Rose asked when Abigail finished. "I was engaged to a man named Richard Sterling, but when your father told me you needed help, that you were dying, I couldn't go through with the wedding." "Why not?" Thomas asked, his serious eyes searching her face. "Because Richard didn't want to help you. He wanted me to ignore your need and marry him anyway, and I realized in that moment that I couldn't spend my life with someone who could turn away from suffering when he had the power to help." "Do you ever regret it?" Rose asked quietly. Abigail pulled both children close. "Not for one single moment. Walking away from that wedding brought me to you, to your father, to this family. It was the best decision I ever made." "But we're not really your children," Thomas said, not sadly, but as a simple statement of fact. "Mama Sarah was our real mother." "Thomas, Rose, listen to me carefully." Abigail cupped both their faces in her hands. "Sarah gave birth to you. She loved you before she ever saw you, and she gave her life bringing you into this world. She'll always be your mother, and you should honor her memory. But I'm also your mother. I'm the one who fed you, who rocked you through countless nights, who taught you to walk and talk, who bandages your scrapes and dries your tears. Love isn't limited. You can love and honor both of us." "We do," Rose said simply. "We love you, Mama. And we love Mama Sarah even though we don't remember her." "That's perfect," Abigail said, tears streaming down her face. "That's exactly how it should be." Thomas hugged her tightly. "Thank you for saving us. Thank you for choosing us. I would make that choice again every single day," Abigail said. "You two are the best things that ever happened to me." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew, the farm prospered, and Jacob and Abigail's love deepened into something rich and lasting. They had their difficult moments, of course. There were failed harvests and lean winters, childhood illnesses that terrified them, disagreements about how to handle the children's various misadventures. But they faced everything together, as true partners. When Thomas was 15, he asked about Richard Sterling one day while helping Abigail in the garden. "Mama, do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd married Mr. Sterling instead of Papa?" Abigail sat back on her heels, considering the question. She'd heard through occasional gossip that Richard had eventually married a wealthy widow in Philadelphia, that he'd become quite successful in banking circles. "Sometimes I think about it," she admitted. "I think about the comfortable house I might have lived in, the ease and security I might have had. But then I look at this life." She gestured around at the modest but thriving farm, at the children playing in the yard, at the cabin that had been expanded and improved over the years. "And I know I chose right. I'd rather have genuine love and purpose than all the comfort in the world." "Were you scared when you walked away?" "Terrified," Abigail said honestly. "I was giving up everything I thought I wanted, security, status, an easy life. But something inside me knew that what I wanted and what I needed were two different things. I needed purpose. I needed to matter in someone's life. Your father gave me that chance." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad you were brave enough to choose us." "So am I, son. So am I." Rose, always more outspoken than her twin, developed into a strong-willed young woman who challenged every expectation placed on her. She wanted to learn farming alongside her father and brothers, refused to stay quietly in the kitchen when there was work to be done outside, and made it clear she had no intention of becoming the meek, obedient wife society expected. "You're going to have a hard time finding a husband with that attitude," Aunt Margaret warned her one day when Rose was 16. "Then I won't marry," Rose said stubbornly. "I'd rather be alone than pretend to be something I'm not." Abigail smiled, recognizing herself in her daughter's fierce independence. "Your Aunt Margaret is right that you'll face challenges, but she's wrong about one thing. The right man will love you exactly as you are. Like Papa loves you. Exactly like that. Your father never asked me to be anything other than myself. He valued my opinions, respected my choices, treated me as an equal partner. That's what you should hold out for, Rose. Don't settle for less." Thomas, meanwhile, grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's quiet strength and his mother Sarah's gentle spirit. He had a gift for understanding both animals and people, could sense when something was wrong before anyone spoke a word about it. When he was 17, he came to Abigail with a question that had clearly been troubling him. "Mama, do you think my birth mother would be proud of who I've become?" Abigail set down the bread dough she'd been kneading and looked at her son, tall now, broad-shouldered, with Sarah's dark eyes and Jacob's strong jawline. "Thomas, I never met your mother Sarah, but everything your father has told me about her tells me she would be incredibly proud of you. You're kind, hard-working, thoughtful, and good. Those are the qualities she valued most in people. I wish I could remember her, even just a little. I know, but you carry her with you every day, in your compassion, in the way you care for injured animals, in your gentle spirit. She lives on through you." Thomas hugged his mother tightly. "I'm lucky to have had two good mothers, one who gave me life, and one who gave me everything else." The younger children, Hannah, Emma, and Samuel, grew up knowing the full story of how their family had come together. They never thought it was strange or shameful that their parents had met under such unusual circumstances. To them, it was simply proof that sometimes the best families were the ones built on love and choice rather than just blood and tradition. When Abigail was 45 and Jacob was 52, tragedy struck again. Jacob was injured in a farming accident, a falling tree branch that crushed his leg badly. The local doctor did what he could, but it was clear Jacob would never work the farm the same way again. The family rallied together. Thomas, now 25 and married with a baby of his own, took over most of the heavy farm work. Rose, 25 and still unmarried by choice, managed the business side of things with sharp intelligence. The younger children helped where they could, But it was Abigail who held everything together during Jacob's recovery. She nursed him through the worst of the pain, encouraged him when despair threatened to overwhelm him, reminded him that his worth wasn't measured by how much physical labor he could do. "I feel useless," Jacob said one particularly difficult night. "Can't work my own land. Can't provide for my family properly." "Jacob Warren, you listen to me." Abigail took his weathered hand in hers. "You've provided for this family in every way that matters. You've given us love, stability, a home, and most importantly, you've shown our children what a good man looks like. That's worth more than any amount of farm work." "You should have married that rich banker," Jacob said, only half joking. "You'd have had an easier life." "I don't want an easier life. I want this life. With you, with our children, with all the mess and struggle and joy of it. Besides," she smiled, "that rich banker couldn't make me laugh the way you do, even when you're grumpy and in pain." Jacob squeezed her hand. "How did I get so lucky?" "You didn't get lucky. You opened your heart to a stranger in a blizzard and gave me the chance to find where I belonged." As Jacob healed, though his leg never fully recovered, he adapted. He couldn't do heavy labor anymore, but he could teach the younger children, manage the household accounts, tend the kitchen garden, and provide the steady, loving presence that held the family together. Thomas and his wife, Mary, built a small house on the Warren property. Rose eventually met a traveling merchant named Daniel who appreciated her fierce spirit and independent mind, and they married when she was 28. The younger children grew, married, and built their own lives, but none of them ever strayed far from the family home. On Jacob and Abigail's 30th wedding anniversary, the family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, filling the expanded cabin with noise and laughter and life. Thomas stood up to make a toast, holding his youngest daughter, named Sarah, in his arms. 30 years ago, my mother made a choice that changed all our lives. She chose compassion over comfort, love over security, and family over everything else. She saved Rose and me when we were dying, but she also saved our father from a lifetime of grief and loneliness. She gave us a home, a family, and showed us what real love looks like." Rose raised her glass. "To Mama and Papa, the best example of true partnership any of us could ask for." Everyone drank to that, and then Hannah added, "And to Mama Sarah, who we never knew but who gave us Thomas and Rose, and started this whole wonderful family." "To both our mothers," Thomas said softly, "one in heaven and one right here with us." The celebration continued late into the night. As things finally wound down and guests began leaving, Abigail and Jacob found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars come out. "Do you ever think about that blizzard night?" Jacob asked. "About me showing up at your wedding like a madman?" "Sometimes," Abigail admitted. "I remember how scared I was, how uncertain. But I also remember the absolute certainty I felt when I made my choice. It was like everything suddenly made sense." "I've never properly thanked you," Jacob said, "for saving my children, for staying, for building this life with me." "You've thanked me every single day for 30 years, Abigail replied. "Every time you've treated me as an equal partner, every time you've supported my decisions, every time you've made me laugh when things were hard. That's thanks enough." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had for 3 decades, watching the legacy they'd built together playing in the yard. "Do you have any regrets?" Jacob asked quietly. Abigail thought about the question carefully. "I regret that Sarah died, that Thomas and Rose never knew their birth mother. I regret the hard winters, when we didn't know if we'd have enough food. I regret every time one of our children was sick or hurt. But I don't regret my choice that day. Not for 1 second." "Neither do I," Jacob said. "Best thing that ever happened to me was you walking through that church door to save my babies." As they aged, Jacob and Abigail became known throughout the region as an example of enduring love and family strength. People would point them out. That's the woman who left her wedding to save dying babies, and the man she eventually married. Young couples sought their advice on marriage and raising children. Struggling families found help and encouragement from them. The Warren home became a place where people knew they'd find compassion, practical assistance, and wisdom earned through years of facing life's challenges together. When Abigail was 68, Aunt Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep. She'd lived to see Abigail's children grow and have children of their own, had been a constant source of wisdom and support through all the years. At the funeral, Abigail spoke about the woman who had raised her and encouraged her to follow her heart. My Aunt Margaret taught me that the most important thing in life isn't security or status or what other people think. It's living according to your values, helping others when you can, and never being afraid to make the hard choice if it's the right choice. She gave me permission to walk away from that church, and in doing so, she gave me my real life. Jacob held Abigail as she grieved, the same way she'd held him through his grief for Sarah all those years ago. They'd learned that love meant showing up for each other in the hard times, not just the easy ones. Thomas and Rose, now in their 40s with children of their own, watched their parents navigate this new grief with grace and mutual support. They'd grown up seeing a marriage built on genuine partnership, respect, and deep affection, and they'd modeled their own marriages on what their parents had shown them. "I hope Mary and I are as good together when we're their age," Thomas said to Rose at Aunt Margaret's wake. "You will be," Rose assured him. "We learn from the best." As Abigail entered her 70s, she began writing down the family story for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wanted them to know the full truth, the blizzard, the wedding she'd abandoned, the dying babies, the grief and struggle and eventual joy. She wrote about Sarah too, making sure that Thomas and Rose's birth mother was honored and remembered. She included every story Jacob had ever told her about Sarah, every memory he'd shared, every detail that might help future generations understand the full complexity of their family history. "Why are you doing this?" Jacob asked one evening, watching her write by lamplight. "Because stories matter," Abigail replied. "Because I want our grandchildren and their grandchildren to know that families come together in all sorts of ways. That sometimes the best families are the ones built on choice and compassion rather than just blood and tradition. That love has room for complicated truths, like honoring a first wife while building a new marriage." Jacob read over what she'd written, his eyes growing moist. "You wrote about Sarah beautifully. Thank you for that. She deserves to be remembered. She gave her life for Thomas and Rose, and she should never be forgotten." When Abigail was 78, she became ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Despite the best care from doctors and the devoted nursing of her family, everyone knew her time was growing short. Jacob never left her side, holding her hand through fever and chills, talking to her when she was conscious, praying over her when she wasn't. "I'm not ready to lose you," he said one lucid afternoon when they were alone. Abigail smiled weakly. "We've had almost 50 good years together. That's more than many people ever get." "I wanted more." "I did too. But Jacob, look at what we built. 5 children, 14 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren so far. A legacy of love and compassion. That's not nothing." "It's everything," Jacob agreed, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You're everything." Thomas and Rose came to say goodbye, both of them struggling to hold back tears. "Thank you for saving us," Thomas said, kissing her forehead. "Thank you for being the best mother anyone could ask for." "Thank you for choosing us," Rose added, her fierce spirit momentarily subdued by grief. "Thank you for showing me what a strong woman looks like." Abigail touched both their faces. "You two were worth every sacrifice, every hard choice. I love you both so much. Honor your father when I'm gone. Take care of each other. And never forget that you had 2 mothers who loved you, one who gave her life for you, and one who devoted her life to you." 3 days later, Abigail slipped away peacefully in her sleep, Jacob holding one hand and Thomas holding the other. The funeral was one of the largest anyone in the region could remember. People came from surrounding towns and territories, people whose lives Abigail had touched through her kindness, her wisdom, and her example. Rose gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite her tears. "My mother taught us that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up. It's about choosing love over fear, compassion over comfort. She could have had an easy life with a wealthy man in town, but she chose a meaningful life with us instead. She chose to save 2 dying babies she'd never met. She chose to honor our birth mother while raising us as her own. She chose, every single day, to build a family based on love and commitment. Thomas added, "She showed us that it's never too late to make the right choice, no matter what it costs you. That real courage means following your heart even when everyone thinks you're crazy. That the best families are built on choice and compassion, not just blood and tradition." Jacob was too overcome with grief to speak at the funeral, but later, standing at her grave, he whispered, "Thank you for coming with me that night. Thank you for saving my children. Thank you for giving me a reason to live when I wanted to die. Thank you for 50 years of love and partnership and joy. I'll see you again soon, my love." Jacob lived 3 more years without Abigail, cared for by his devoted children. He spent his time telling stories to his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they knew every detail of how their family had come together. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, his last words were, "Tell Abigail I'm coming. Tell Sarah I kept my promise. The babies lived, and they lived well." They buried Jacob next to Abigail, and on their shared headstone, the family had inscribed, "Jacob and Abigail Warren, they built a family on love and second chances." But nearby, visible from Jacob and Abigail's grave, stood another stone that had been there all along. Sarah McKinney Warren, beloved wife and mother, her love lives on. Thomas made sure all 3 graves were tended carefully, decorated with fresh flowers every week. 3 people who loved each other enough to make an unusual family work. He told his own grandchildren, "That's what real love looks like." The story of Abigail Warren, the bride who walked away from her wedding to save dying babies, became regional legend. Parents told it to their children as an example of true compassion and courage. Young women facing difficult choices thought about her bravery. And the Warren family, spreading across multiple generations and states, never forgot where they came from. Rose's daughter, named Abigail in honor of her grandmother, asked to hear the full story when she was 12 years old. Rose took her to the cemetery where all 3, Sarah, Jacob, and Abigail, were buried. "Your great-grandmother walked away from her own wedding during a blizzard to save 2 dying babies, your Uncle Thomas and me," Rose explained. "She gave up everything she thought she wanted and found everything she actually needed." Was she scared? Terrified, she told me once. But she said fear is just a feeling, and you can't let feelings make your decisions for you. You have to let your values guide you. Young Abigail touched her great-grandmother's headstone. "I want to be brave like her." "Then live like she did." Rose said, "Choose compassion over comfort. Choose love over fear. Choose to show up for people who need you, even when it's inconvenient or difficult." That's how you honor her memory. Over the following decades, the Warren family continued to grow and spread. Some moved west to California during the gold rush. Others stayed in the region, farming the same land Jacob had worked. But all of them carried the story of their origins, a story of tragedy transformed into triumph, of death giving way to life, of choice creating family. The small cabin that Jacob and Sarah had built together, where Thomas and Rose had been born, where Abigail had saved them and later raised them, became a family landmark. It was preserved and maintained by rotating family members, a physical reminder of where it all began. Inside, they kept Sarah's quilt on the bed, Abigail's rocking chair by the fireplace, and Jacob's tools hanging on the wall. Photos of all 3, Sarah, Jacob, and Abigail, had places of honor on the mantel. When the cabin turned 100 years old, the family gathered for a celebration that brought together over 200 descendants of Jacob Warren's original family. They came from across the country, carrying pieces of the family story, sharing memories passed down through generations. The oldest living descendant, Thomas's grandson at age 87, stood to speak to the gathering. "I never met my great-grandmother Abigail or my great-grandfather Jacob," he said, "but I grew up hearing their story. And the lesson I took from it is this: the best families are built on love, choice, and showing up for each other. Our family started with 3 people: Sarah, who gave her life for her children; Jacob, who loved enough to accept help; and Abigail, who chose compassion over comfort. We're all here because of their courage and love. He gestured to the crowd of faces, all carrying some combination of Sarah's features, Jacob's build, or Abigail's expressions. We're living proof that one moment of courage, one choice to help instead of walking away, can change countless lives for generations to come. The gathering concluded with everyone placing flowers on the 3 graves, Sarah, Jacob, and Abigail, thanking them for the family they'd created together under such unusual and challenging circumstances. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, descendants of the Warren family scattered across the old farm property, children playing where other children had played a century before, adults sharing stories in the same spots where Jacob and Abigail had once sat together. The story that had begun with a desperate father bursting into a church during a blizzard, pleading for help for his dying babies, had become a story of enduring love, chosen family, and the power of compassion to transform tragedy into legacy. And somewhere, perhaps, 3 spirits watched together: Sarah, who had given life; Jacob, who had fought to preserve it; and Abigail, who had devoted herself to nurturing it, all of them united in love for the family they created together. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.